And now I'd like to welcome you to today's Leadership and Development webinar, The Power of Daring Leadership, Shift Your Perspective to Boost Your Courage. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. She is a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, Barb Van Heer. Barb, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mayanne. I'm happy to be here today with all of you. And as we walk through this, you'll notice we have the slides here for you. I believe we have them as a handout, so you can download them and follow along. And then there's also a summary handout for you to use at some point too, if you'd like. Let me see if I can make sure I advance my slides. There we go. Just a little bit more about me so you understand my background. I have over 25 years experience in leadership development. I was a consultant with Accenture and IBM over many years, and have an appreciation for technology implementations and how that makes our businesses and our world run better. From a New Horizons perspective, I know that many of you are engaged in a lot of change that's happening in our world today. And I've also taken that consulting experience and added to it coaching, I help leaders, teams, and individuals really navigate the increasing amount of chaos and change we're experiencing in our world. Let's see, that's enough about me, I think. Here's the agenda. In the session today, we'll start to recognize the symptoms as well as the impact of negative reactions to stress. So I think we can all agree we have all are experiencing a lot of stress and strain, especially in this year. And you'll start to see there's an impact as we're reacting to that increasing pressure. We'll start to personalize your opportunity and the benefit of navigating that change in a more positive way, your positive responses to stress. We'll talk about an experience and apply this idea of shifting perspectives. So I'll give you a tool that you can use because your perspective really can shape everything about how you navigate change and increasing stress. And then we'll kind of understand some of the requirements to really sustain this shift. So again, this isn't meant to replace training. Oftentimes concepts like these can unfold over about a 3-day workshop. So in order to really land it, the training component is really important. But also today, I know you'll find some good value in some of the concepts we're talking through. So right now, just take a moment and think about what's your current perspective. And by that, I mean, like, as you're looking about either your life or work, your career, or just 2020 in general, start to notice that you have a certain point of view or there's a story you're telling yourself about this year. And think about it in terms of a headline or a summary, maybe a word or two that categorizes how you're thinking about life, work 2020. It probably has some emotion to it. A reaction to it. And I don't think we're able to actually have people chat in here, are they? Which is fine. I just want you to notice that we're all in a perspective all the time about different things, but we don't often pause to notice what that is. So just helpful to bookmark and notice what your current perspective is on life and work. And we're going to start to add in here some of the reasons why we're feeling a lot more pressure and strain. We're going to talk through this acronym called VUCA, and this was created after 9/11 as a concept our military embraced when everything changed after that event. But it really applies to business leaders today, or everybody, just everybody really. But we're all noticing a lot more increased volatility. There's just a lot more pressure to take risks. And things are just shifting wildly and suddenly and unexpectedly. And so that's kind of capturing that volatility. It's just this quick unpredictability. We also are experiencing a lot of uncertainty. It's just, we're having to act without knowing what's true or what's real or what's, we don't have any trends or data. Everything's new. And so when we're in this environment where it's just hard to be black and white or really sure about anything, but you have to operate anyway. And of course, you're aware there's a massive amount of increasing complexity with globalization. Our technology allows us to connect instantly and globally, and it's just creating a web and a mesh. And sometimes when we act in our world and do something or make a decision or change something, we don't often realize that it affects somebody in the web. We have all sorts of unintended impacts that start to happen because of this complexity and connection. And then there's a lot of ambiguity. So it's very hard to tell what truth is. It's very hard to tell what's capital T true anymore. And so we kind of have to make our own way and make our own truth and decide and make choices. And because of all of this, our self-awareness, our ability to choose and self-author is critical. It's the only way we can navigate these VUCA dynamics. We also have, because all of you are connected to technology, the digital transformation dilemma. Technology is increasing exponentially. Like our capabilities, our artificial intelligence, all sorts of things are making the world a better place for sure, but it happens to be outstripping our ability as humans to adapt. And so we're all being bombarded with upgrades and new Intel chips, and I'm not the technology person, but you all are, so you understand that technology is far outpacing our ability as humans to keep up. And so our job is, as companies and organizations and leaders, is to start to figure out, well, okay, if that's true, how do we help the humans adapt and move up quicker? And if we just take a look at this glass is just overflowing, let's just talk about 2020 for a moment in terms of stress. There's an incredible amount of just work stress. Before 2020, you had to think about delivery, relationships, career, change, all sorts of these things were just part of regular life. Now we have, our home life, and if we're balancing that out, our relationships, financial health, balance between work and home create some stress and strain. And then there's 2020. This year, for all of us, has presented some particular challenges on top of just what's normal life. So I think we can all agree there's just an incredible amount of stress and strain. And so the reason this is important to call out is because how we respond to this is really important. And there are some natural human responses to all of this stress and strain. Some of the symptoms you'll notice are frustration or worry. You could be disappointed or start doubting yourself. You may have regrets about how you made decisions or operated. The shame piece of just feeling like you aren't enough is underlying a lot of this. Anxiety, sadness, irritation, nervousness, all of these are symptoms, and they're just emotions. So there's nothing in particular that's wrong with emotions. In fact, it's the gift of being human. But there's a noticing of these emotions and noticing like how long we hang on to them. And so what can start to happen, I'm going to take us through a little bit of neuroscience here. If we look at our brain and how it's organized, this blue section here is our emotional limbic system, our feeling brain. And so as humans, that's just a natural part of how we respond to what's going on in our lives and our world. But those emotions can either do a couple of things. They can kick us into our survival brain. So we can become stressed and strained with all these negative emotions, and then we become very interested in our survival, and we become very reactive. And one way Brene Brown talks about this is we become very armored up. It becomes very self-protective. So those emotions are a signal for us to self-protect and keep ourselves together. But with some awareness and some practice in building the muscle, we can take those emotions, even if they're sort of challenging for us to really be with, and we can put them up into that green section of the brain, which is the more responsive neocortex thinking part of our brain. And from that space, we can start to adapt and be more resilient and make choices and move forward despite the circumstances. So it just helps us navigate better. So that's some of the neuroscience behind some of this. But because if we take those emotions and then head down into our lizard brain and become more reactive, here's some of what the impacts are. I'm just going to get all these out here. We can, because we're armored up and self-protective, we can sometimes notice a decrease in our performance. Like it's just harder to get a lot done. We become more stuck or unsure. I'm sure some of you have noticed some of these in your life. They come up, right, at certain pressure points in our life. Our trust of others goes down. We can start to discharge some of those negative emotions. And what I mean by that is we might be experiencing anger. We deflect it out to those around us, whether it's our teams or our families and friends. That increased toxicity is something that just sometimes will happen as a reaction to some of those negative emotions. Our motivation might go down, our problem solving may go down, tolerance, shame and blame goes up. It hurts sometimes, those emotions. And so when we're down in our lizard brain, we start to shame and blame others around us because it's hard for us to kind of navigate from the higher part of our brain here. Decreased resilience and decreased growth and learning. So hopefully you're seeing that there are circumstances that are going to create emotions. That's just something we can't change. But if we allow ourselves to become more reactive or armored up because of that, this can have some negative impacts on your work and life. So now we're going to do a poll. Mayan's going to help us out. We're going to talk about what's your typical reaction to stress. So I want to personalize this a little bit. And Mayan, I may not be able to see it, but you'll put it up. Perfect. Great. I see it. So as you look at the quick poll here, select one of the following. Under stress and strain, do you find yourself getting overly nice? And do you try harder to be liked and to fit in? Do you find yourself getting overwhelmed and stuck? Just sort of not feeling like you want to do much of anything? Do you find yourself overly judgmental and critical of those around you? Do you tend to avoid and just disengage completely? Or do you become overly controlling and forceful? So take a minute and respond to all of us, by the way, have at least one of these that happens on our worst day. So there's no judgment here. It's just part of our human condition. Some of you may have 2 or 3 that sound familiar. I know I do. How are we doing on the poll?
All right. Give folks a few more seconds here just to put in their answers. I'll close it shortly here. All right. We have about 4% saying they get overly nice and try harder to be liked. 31% get overwhelmed and stuck. 20% say they get overly judgmental and critical. 24% avoid and disengage. And 22% become overly controlling or forceful.
Oh, fantastic. So everybody was able to pick more than one, which is great. I think because we were over 100. Anyway, my point is that you were very well spread out based on what I see in the research. And so the good news is you all are very normal compared to the regular population. All of us have reactions to stress and strain. So let me see if I can get back here to the presentation. Thank you so much for completing that poll. And so here are 5 typical responses, the way we respond to stress and strain if we end up going into that reactive part of our brain. Some of us will fold. And by that, we mean we just become overly nice. It's very important for us to fit in and to keep good relationships. But in order to do that, we will sometimes compromise what our agenda or what we're trying to get done to do that. And so it's just overly nice and not as effective on the doing side. The freezing part, it feels like we're just stuck. We become very inefficient. It's hard to move. We get a little overwhelmed. And so that's another one of those typical responses. And then some of us will end up just withdrawing and finding other ways to get distracted or work on other things rather than getting engaged where we're needed. And so the impact on others is that we can be very mysterious or vague or elusive. It doesn't feel like we're engaged. And the judgment side, for those of us who have that as a habit, I notice this with my children sometimes when I'm really stressed out, but I become overly critical and looking for flaws out there because I'm just having a hard time dealing with everything that's going on. The fight response is when we just become overly involved, overly aggressive, overly dominating, and that's another response to stress. So when we self-protect, that's what Brene Brown would call armored leadership. And we all use armor to protect ourselves. However, that armor is heavy and it creates some negative impacts. And as we start to notice that, we might start to say, I think I want to make a different choice. Because when we're armored up, we are not in connection with others. And as humans, we are hardwired for connection. So it is extremely important for us to notice when we've created that armor and stopped being in relationship with others. And it's all emotionally driven, and it's predictable, but there is a way. The goal is to create spaces where armor is not necessary or rewarded in our work environments. Courage is the way forward. So courage and vulnerability really is the solution, and this is based on research that we see in neuroscience and that Brene Brown has done around shame. We really can improve and shift. The emotions will exist, the context and circumstances will exist, but how we respond versus react to these emotions is the muscle we want to build. We need to have more self-control, more empathy and compassion for both ourselves and for others around us. Let's see. So in her latest book, Dare to Lead, Brene Brown interviewed a lot of executives, and she's building off years and years of research on shame. And she started to ask what needs to change. And this was even before 2020. But the answer she's getting consistently is that we need braver leaders and more courageous cultures at work. And you really can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. So as you can see too, at the core of this is the emotions that are our human experience. If we're able to get connected with that, that's a very vulnerable thing for us to do. Vulnerability is the emotion that we experience when we are faced with risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure. So that VUCA environment and everything we're experiencing, this is vulnerability for us to actually own that and then find our way forward from there. So let's talk about your call to courage, and this is just for you to take a moment to self-reflect. It takes a lot of courage to accept the circumstances that you're in and let go of what you can't change. That is courage by definition. You need to be brave and embrace what you can control, and that's your perspective and how you're reacting to your circumstances. And so what's a good reason for you to start thinking about this and dive in to do this work? Like, why would it be good for you to manage your stress? Might you be thinking about your health? Might you be thinking about how you're impacting your teams, your family, your friends? Like, are you noticing that that gives you a good reason to start looking at this? Or just increase your happiness and joy, or just try to get through the year. I don't know what it is for you, but find your why. If you don't find what makes this relevant for you, it will be very hard to kind of absorb and do much with this work, because all of this is an inside out work to do. So it starts with you, it ends with you. What's your why? So hopefully all of you have taken a moment to write that down. Because there are benefits to courage. And if we are able to embrace it, here's some of what we might experience. We will be able to find more clarity of purpose and a way forward. We will have an increased ability to empathize and create connection and work with others. We will find the ability to be more curious when we embrace courage and vulnerability. We'll be more creative. We'll have more confidence, self-acceptance, productivity. You can see all of these things, more gratitude, integrity and alignment, and more calm. I would like a little more of that, please, right? So this is maybe giving you more reason for your why. So we're going to shift into the, so to speak, into the tool piece of this. So one of the elements of taking that emotion and circumstances and moving up into our neocortex is our ability to notice that we're in a perspective and choose the perspective we want to be in. So we're going to work with a tool here, and it's all tied into the work Brene Brown is doing. She calls it, what's the story I'm making up? And so all of us, we are just hardwired as humans to tell stories. And our perspective, how we see the world or how we're looking at different challenges, then sets the stage for the story we make up. And so if we can intercept that and understand that we're driving off of a perspective, and we always have the power to choose our perspective, if we can do that, then we can start to rewrite our story. So we're going to do a quick exercise and just play around with perspectives on change. So all of you know what change is. In fact, as you're doing the work of a technologist, you probably bring a lot of change to different people and organizations, but it's happening to you too. So you probably have a perspective. So let's play around with changes. And let's imagine you're in the perspective change is scary. Like something's happening in your world. We'll take COVID, for example. That's scary, right? That we all experienced a lot of that change in March this year. And so if we're looking at change as scary, our shoulders are kind of hunched up to our elbows, our chest might collapse, and we might just kind of body-wise sort of withdraw or kind of step away from or be very concerned about what's happening around. Now, from this place, the story we're making up, okay, I'm going to be dramatic, but we're all going to die. Like the world's going to end. Like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, right? And so when we're in the perspective of change is scary, the story we make up is going to be a lot of doom and gloom. Okay, so you can see how the perspective impacts the story. Now I'm going to shake that off, and we're going to go to the next one. Sometimes we think about change and it might be kind of like a playground, like, yay, we're going to change. We get some new tools. Like there's a cool new technology thing that's coming out, a new app or a new language or something we get to play with. And we think, wow, this is really cool. We get to learn. And so our whole face will shift, our shoulders will go down, we'll get excited, we'll lean in. The story we're going to tell ourselves about the change is going to be, it's exciting, it's fun, it's playful, we can be curious. So there's a whole different story we tell. Frustrating. I don't know about you, but there have been many changes in my life where I've just been like, wow, I'm not on board. I don't like this. I'm frustrated. I fight it. I just don't want to do it. And so frustrating is another perspective we could hold about a change that's coming up, and just imagine how the story we're going to tell ourselves from that perspective. We're just not going to want to do it. We'll be a lot more resistant to change. And last, we'll talk about changes like waves. So we might just be in the perspective. Sometimes we have to push and it's really hard and we're kind of challenged, and sometimes it ebbs and we just kind of are allowed to rest. So sometimes your work may have crests where you're working really hard, and then other times, you can catch up and catch your breath. So if we think of change like waves, we have a whole different story we'll tell ourselves there. So hopefully you're starting to see how the perspective can really shape the story you're telling yourselves, and then how you're going to operate and act and do things based on that story. So take a moment and just kind of check in. What's the story you're telling yourself about change? Maybe it's one of the 4 perspectives, based on one of the 4 perspectives I shared, or maybe you have another. So just take a moment and start to think through what's the story you're telling yourself about a change. And it could connect back to the question I asked you, what's your perspective about life or work or 2020? What's the story you're telling yourself based on that perspective? And I'm just noticing I don't have a lot of time to give you, so you can always take that as a question to consider later. We're going to move on into this tool. I like to reference Carol Dweck's work. She wrote a book called Growth Mindset, and the perspectives work and the shifting from armored to daring leadership is all wrapped up in our mindset. The growth mindset is really, it can be developed. The growth mindset is aware, at choice, conscious. There's some self-control to it. And we start to see change as useful and welcome, and we're curious about it. A growth mindset is able to embrace the VUCA world and do something with the circumstances we're in regardless, and to move forward in a productive and positive way. The fixed mindset is an armored mindset. It is, change might be hurtful or personal or criticizing or threatening, and we would find ourselves creating stories that cause us to be very resistant to change. So all of this is tied together. It's all part of the same work that we're doing across different books and different authors and researchers. Let's talk about what is a perspective. So a perspective is a way of looking at things, a point of view about something. It's important to notice we're all in a perspective all the time, regardless of whether or not we're aware of it. So it's kind of that underlying belief system drives our perspectives. But perspectives do drive our behaviors and our emotions and our choices. So that's the story we're telling ourselves, then drives our actions and how we operate in the world. Perspectives are infinite, meaning the thing or the circumstance we're looking at can be looked at in an infinite number of ways. And we always get to choose how we want to look at it. And all perspectives have a little bit of truth to them. They may not be capital T true, but it's really important for you to get. You always have choice and control over how you look at the circumstances of your life. You cannot control always the circumstances, but you can control how you look at them. And so there's always a little, you can make true any way you look at something. And so we'll walk through this a little bit more. But cultivating your awareness around your mindset or perspectives is really one of the most important things you can do as an individual leader, human in this planet. It drives conscious commitment. It helps coach yourself and others and help get groups and teams through resistance and all those powerful emotions that are caused by some of the stress and strain of change. It helps to empower you and others and enable movement and positive motion forward. And it helps drive your personal responsibility for your life and change in your work in the world. So you don't have to give that over to somebody else. You get to be in control over how you write your story. So we're going to do an exercise. So you could put a change topic here in the middle or anything else you're particularly challenged by. So it could be, I don't know, fall COVID lockdowns, or it could be new deadline for a project that you're trying to get across the finish line. Whatever it is, like pick something that you're having a little bit of challenge with. And I'd like you to make it just as neutral as possible, just a circumstance in your life that's just causing you to be a little more stuck, reactive, armored, and write that in the middle. If you want to, if you've downloaded any of this, and you probably haven't yet, but you could also do this in your handout. But we're going to walk through this together. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to walk through some of the more negative emotions. And that's okay. We just want to own them. We don't have to stay with them. But let's think about the perspective of being overwhelmed. So whatever it is you picked as your challenge, let's just imagine you're completely overwhelmed. Your perspective is, this is just really difficult and challenging and it's too much. And let's think of a metaphor that describes for you what overwhelmed is. So sometimes for me, I can think of like drowning is one way I think about overwhelm. That's sort of a metaphor for how I might experience it. Yeah, and so hopefully all of you have kind of thought of a metaphor when you're overwhelmed, what does it feel like? It might be quicksand or drowning or just snowed in or however you might imagine that. And then what's the story you tell yourself about this change from overwhelm? Anyway, you may end up feeling like you can't do anything or it's too much, or if you're overwhelmed, you might feel like you're keeping yourself up to 1 a.m. every night trying to catch up, and you might feel exhaustion or whatever. There may be a story of resentment that you're telling yourself from this perspective. Just take a moment and shake that off and notice that that's just one way of looking at the change you have there. And now we're going to notice there's another perspective that could also be true. And so frustrating. Let's think about this change you have in the middle and imagine it being like super frustrating, or kind of work up some anger or tension. And imagine that there's a sensation in your body that captures your frustration perfectly. For some of you, it might be your shoulder blades. For some of you, it might be your hands. Some of you might just feel pressure in your forehead. I know my husband gets his forehead all kind of wrinkled up when he's frustrated. But imagine a body sensation. A lot of times our bodies have a lot of information about what perspective we're holding. And as you notice that, what is the story your body wants to make up about this circumstance or change you have in the middle? Your body will often take over and start telling that story. And if it's from the perspective of frustrated, how are you operating, or what's the impact of being frustrated as you look at that topic? And again, just notice that that's one piece of truth as you relate to that topic, but it's not the one you have to choose. We'll go to the next one. We're kind of moving into a more positive direction here. So start to think about a role model for you, somebody you value and cherish. It could be a teacher or a coach, somebody, a family member, a friend, or it could be a popular figure, a fictional character, anybody who just represents wisdom for you. And imagine who that is. And then imagine that person or that character could speak to you, almost like whisper in your ear as it relates to this circumstance or change. And you can start to feel like, oh, yeah, there's a different way of looking at this through this role model that you have. And again, it's just another perspective, but you would tell yourself a different story if you were connected to an important role model in your life. Hopefully you can just sense that that's a huge shift from either overwhelmed or frustrated into, there's some wisdom I can tap into here if I think about people who are important to me. We'll go to the next one, creative. So let's just think of something artistic that you care about. I have some posters up, or artists that I really like. Gustav Klimt is one of them, but you may think about art that you like to do, or maybe your kids had a drawing that you ended up putting on your refrigerator. Whatever it is, think of something creative or artistic. And then it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it'll come together here in a minute. That's a whole new way of looking at your challenge, your circumstance, or this change you have in the middle. And if you start to just get connected with something creative for you, maybe it's something colorful, or maybe it's Play-Doh, I don't know. But there's a whole different way you're going to relate to your topic from a space of creativity. And hopefully you can start to feel like, oh, your brain will start to naturally rewire and tell a different story if you're looking at that topic through the lens of creativity and artistic perspective. So hopefully you can feel that. And now think about something playful. It could be a game, maybe one from your childhood, maybe you have kids, but something playful, or something you play with your friends. Maybe it's cards or frisbee, I don't know. But start to think about what it's like to be more playful for you and how you do that. And then what does that offer you as you look at this topic in the middle? It might start to offer you, oh, this could be fun, or this could be, how could I gamify this? How could I turn this into a playful competition maybe? But again, the story you're telling yourself will be completely rewritten from the perspective of playful. And last but not least, I think that music is one of the most easy, effortless ways to shift perspective of anything I can think of. And so think of a song that pops in your head. It doesn't have to be your favorite, but just one that, I don't know, if you remember Jerry Maguire and he's trying to find the music on the radio and Free Falling comes on, whatever, I don't care what song pops in your head, but somehow it'll relate. And sometimes the message from the radio will give you a way of looking at the topic or change in the middle that helps you rewrite that story. So music, again, giving yourself the playlist or putting on some meditative music or classical music, whatever it is, or just uplifting anything can often really shift your perspective quickly. But before we move off this slide, what I want to point out is the topic in the middle did not change. So you can use this formula in any way at any time and put something in the middle that's sort of unchangeable, something you can't shift, but then start to pick out different ways of looking at it. And the more random you can get, the more your brain likes that, because your brain is kind of hardwired into whatever story you've been sitting with for a while. And this tool is trying to shift and shake up that pattern in your brain that you always tell the story this way from overwhelm or frustration. And so you want to really give yourself the opportunity to look at some different ways of looking at this challenge. And they may seem weird or out of left field, but they really help you shift that pattern and come up with a different choice, because you get to choose what perspective you want to be with. That's the most important thing for you to take away from this. You can't change your circumstances. You can choose your perspective. So this is the process. I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly so we can get to the questions here at the end. But you want to define the topic. You want to describe your current experience, perspective, or the story you're telling yourself. And then you want to generate new perspectives, and then you get to choose and shift. So here are some tips for how you would do each of these 4 steps. You want that topic in the middle to be neutral. You want it to be specific, and it can be a change or a circumstance or a challenge for you. And it's the focal point of what you want to change or shift. Some organizational examples are new systems or customers, new boss. In our personal life, it could just be circumstances like COVID or other shifts or changes that we might be experiencing that we want to look at in a different way. Now, I love this picture with the steam coming out of her ears, but you want to describe your current experience. So that's getting us into that blue part of our brain where we have emotions and we want to own it. The emotions themselves are not bad. They're real, they're part of our experience, but that doesn't mean we have to sit in them and let them write our story, but we do want to honor them and recognize them. So getting your current perspective or perspectives out is just part of the process. It's just a noticing that you could look at this topic this way, but then you're going to also give yourself some options beyond just this current perspective, but just own it. It's okay. It's just, it's not like, it's like a hot stove, and this current emotions like the hot stove, if you put your hand on it, it would tell you want to take your hand off, but you wouldn't want to keep it there. I don't know if that makes sense, but one way of looking at it. But the fun part is to really generate these new perspectives. You could try the opposite or the ideal. You could imagine the wisdom from the role models or from history, things like that. You could do some really fun, playful things, like look at it from the different seasons, or you can get really wild and creative. The neuroscience would say the more wild you get, the better opportunity your brain has of rewiring into that new story. It doesn't mean you have to stay out there in the brainstormy, crazy place, but it'll help bring you back to a solid footing with a new story. You can imagine yourself at different points of time too. That's also a fun way to do this. And then you get to choose. Once you do that exploration, you get to pick, and you want to lock in your choice with a reminder. You could get a sticky note or alarms or things like that. You want to really, if you're going to choose the song, put it on your playlist and listen to it every day. You want to start to create habits and structure around your new perspective, because it'll be very easy to slip back into your old story. So find ways to lock in your new story. So we're done with the tool piece of this for now, but I want to tie this back into Brene Brown's work. This work of being conscious and understanding your emotions and noticing you have a story to tell, and choosing what story you want to tell is really brave and courageous work. And Brene Brown uses the metaphor of the arena. For those of us who are embracing daring leadership, we are the ones who are in the arena, and fighting the good fight. And I'll just read this aloud. I love this quote by Theodore Roosevelt. "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly." And this quote was the inspiration for all of her work on daring leadership. This is brave, brave work to be in the arena and choose your perspective in the story you're telling yourself. So here's just some suggestions for making it stick. Make it a habit. Try to find ways to operationalize your new perspective and your new story. Make it fun. Sometimes when we do this work of leadership development, we make it so serious, but truly the way is to make it fun and to embrace it with some lightness. And make it visible, like truly operationalize it into behaviors. If you are choosing a new perspective that's more playful, put play in your day, like make it part of your calendar. So to make it visible is to make it part of your behaviors. We really know from the research Brene has done that courage is a set of 4 skill sets. They are teachable, they are measurable, they are observable. So this is just a look at the 4 skill sets of courage. Rumbling with vulnerability is some of what we've touched on here. Living into our values is another extremely positive and powerful way to be more daring and courageous. Also being conscious and mindful of how we build trust with ourselves and with others, and learning to rise is a resilience skill set that helps really rewrite the stories we tell ourselves. So all of these relate to what we just covered today. And Dare to Lead is a workshop, a 24-hour workshop that helps all of us be more brave in our lives and our work, and help us bring that into our work cultures. And I am going to transition this over either to Kara or Mayanne, because we're going to relate this to what New Horizons has to offer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Barb, for spending time with us and presenting as well. And thank you for everyone who's taken the time to join us today as well. We'll get to the questions in just a minute. Please take some time to type it into the questions menu option now, and we'll get to them shortly. Just so you know, New Horizons has been teaching virtual live training since 2001, and all of our facilitators and instructors are trained to teach face-to-face and virtually with ease. So please know that we know a thing or two when it comes to training. And if you could go to the next slide really quick here, Barb.
Yeah, sure. Oops, hold on a minute. Where's my, go down. There we go, sorry.
Not a problem here. So just wanted to let you know about some upcoming classes that are coming down the pipe here. We have, of course, taking your learning to the next, if you want to take your learning to the next level, and if you're interested in the material that's presented in this webinar, or if you have any questions regarding what's available to you, please contact your local center. For more information, you can go to newhorizons.com and do a quick zip code search to find the center that's nearest you if you do not already have a local advisor that's working with you. We do have a Dare to Lead class scheduled in the month of December, so please take a look and check that out. Click on the link to find more details. We're trying something new really with the delivery of this class. So instead of doing 3 full days of class, we are going to break it up and do it into 6 half-day sessions. And also you can check out the links below for our other upcoming leadership and professional development courses and topics. The links are in the presentation that you can also download as well. And our ongoing webinar schedule is currently up to date. So just click on the webinars link when you go to newhorizons.com to see what else we have there between now and the end of the year, which is crazy to say. Let's see here, just giving folks an opportunity here, Barb, just to type in some questions. So I'll give everyone a moment there, just so.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions about the tools or the topics. And the story I'm telling myself is I did such a good job explaining everything, you have no questions.
Of course, no, I was actually going to say that as well. I mean, a lot of the material that you presented is so relevant to what we're going through and what's happening now that I feel like it resonated with a lot of folks that were joining us today. Let's see here. We do have one question here that's coming up here. Do you have a path of Brené's work that you would recommend starting with for someone new?
I really think that her Dare to Lead workshop, the 24-hour workshop, is a culmination of all of her books and research. So that's kind of, if you really wanted to get in touch with her research and her tools and skill sets, that would be the most impactful thing that you could do, is to attend that workshop. Also recommend reading the book. The Dare to Lead book is available. And she has also just come out for some of us who struggle with the pressure of trying to be perfect. She has a book called The Gifts of Imperfection that she released about 10 years ago, but she has just re-released in a new edition that is extremely helpful for those of us who often feel like the pressure to be perfect.
Let's see. No, sorry, I was on mute there for a second. You know, with our upcoming course in December, that workshop, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit what the experience will be in the workshop, just to kind of tease for those who are on our call today, just so they know what to possibly expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the workshop, it's 24 hours, and we found that it's going to work a lot better to do it in half-day pieces. So the workshop will be on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. We'll do 4 hours and 4 hours, and then the following week the same, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then a third week. In the session, we spend a lot of time creating the connection and the agreements for how we want to work together, because there's a lot of self-reflection, self-discovery, but also a lot of working with other participants in the course to apply the concepts and work on the skill sets and apply them to your real life. So it's very activity driven, discussion driven, self-reflection. There's a lot of that. There's a combination of videos. What I really appreciate about what Brené Brown has done is she's taken some of the teaching for us. So there are exclusive videos that are part of the workshop. So we'll be sharing those and then breaking out into smaller groups to work through the topics and apply them to your real life. So by the time you will have done some what I would consider to be heavy lifting on things that are important to you, and really learned about what your armored responses are and how to step in and notice that you're going down that more reactive pathway. And then you'll have skill sets on how to embrace vulnerability. There are some rumble skills that are extremely valuable and important to how you interact with others. From a teaming perspective, friends and family, all of that, the rumble skills are extremely helpful. You will do some work on your values and learning how to operationalize your top 2 values. And that can change everything with how you respond to stress and this crazy world we're in. You'll also work through trust and learn how to really trust yourself. And then also take that and work it into relationships at work or at home too. So there's so work there. And then finally, the learning to rise is really that piece we talked about today of rewriting your story. So by the end of it, you will actually have a new story to kind of go out and work with.
Great. And another question that did come up is, any tips on how to encourage a courageous culture when others around you haven't been really through this type of training?
Yeah, I just big sigh because we all have to do our own work. So I'd always start there, right? It's always important for us to keep doing the work if we're awake and aware and choosing that. It is a little bit more of a challenge to look at it culturally. Oftentimes you want to try to find sponsors or champions or other leaders in the organization. And quite honestly, oftentimes it comes down to just finding a few early adopters and some that are in positions that are able to start to bring it into the organization. But certainly it'll be easier the more people you get on board and that you can get trained. You can have book clubs if you like, but obviously getting a tiny group of early adopters into the training can then start to really expand and grow this new culture of courage.
Great, thanks for answering that. Seeing if anyone else has any other questions. All right, well, Barb, as always, thank you for presenting and on behalf of New Horizons, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing some of you in the upcoming December workshop with Barb here. So please take a look at that. And with that being said, everyone take care. The webinar session is over and you now may log off. Thank you again.
Thank you.